Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Then I described some maps for you to see where we are located. Mendoza is there in blue.
Okay.
That's South America, and then you see Mendoza. Then there's a following slide showing you a picture of the native people. And you already heard that, but this is why water is so important and make us unique in the world for wine growing, because we manage water here. Then the following slide is a map of how our wine region is. And I'm sure Lauren can, or I can send you that map so you can see bigger. But basically there you see the mountains and the melted snow that feed the rivers. And that is our source of water here in Mendoza. Then it's more history about how we got independence 20, 30 years after you did. And in this very slide that you see now is, vines were introduced here 400 years ago. Any vines, no varieties. But in 1860s, there was a governor in Mendoza that brought a French agronomist that introduced the French varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, anything, and Malbec. And that was like a key point for us because Malbec was used in France just to give color to the wines, but here it gave a completely different expression and became very well adapted to many kilometers of our geography. Are you following me?
Yep, you're doing great, Paula.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then is the following slide is our water source and how we manage water. So basically, you can go through this presentation that we'll send you afterwards. But basically what we do here is the Andes are so high, are nearly 7,000 meters high. So all like the rain we should get from the Pacific Ocean, because we are too far away from the Atlantic Ocean. We are 15 kilometers far away from the Atlantic. So all our water in forms of precipitation, rain or snow, we get it from the Pacific. But because the Andes are so high, the precipitation just stops in the Andes in form of snow. So we have to wait until the spring and summer that snow is melted and form rivers. And here, this was a system that was started by the native inhabitants previous to Christopher Columbus conquering America. We have a system of different canals, reservoirs, ditches that we manage water in the way that you see in the picture. So the rivers are stopped in a point, and then there is a system of canals, bigger, narrower, and so the water can get to every cultivated area, let's say. That is, our state is one of those locations where water comes in the small canals. When you sell a pallet and you come here, you will be able to see it. Anyway, let's go
Easy
to the
do with
following.
Your delicious wine. Easy to sell a pallet, Paula.
Yes. Well, the following slide, it shows how we manage the land using these sort of ridges and furrows to manage the water, to conduct the water to the vineyards. That is a picture of our state. And this is the way that we get the water once a week, once every 10 days, once every 2 weeks, depending on the time of the year. And we manage the water through these different ridges and furrows to irrigate our plants. Then in history, following the history of Argentina, there were 2 key points here. Another 2 key points is the settling of European immigrants at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. There were a lot of problems, wars, and hunger in Europe. And some of them went to North America and some of them came to South America. And in South America, we got a lot of Italians, Spaniards, French, people who knew wine growing. And the other very important thing here was the complexion of the railway. Because here in Mendoza, we are 1,200 kilometers from Buenos Aires. So the market, the drinkers, the consumers were in Buenos Aires, were located there. So we had to get the wine from where it was produced, now here in Mendoza, to Buenos Aires. So these 2 different facts were key to development our industry here. So the settling of European immigrants and the railway complexion, which was done by the English. Well, the following slide is showing pictures and figures about how many Italian, Spanish, and many Europeans came to this part of the world. Following slide, is how the evolution of how many hectares or acres we have planted since 1910s to the 70s here. In those years, in that span of 60 years, we mainly drank water or wine. There were no soda waters, no spirits, no beers, no Coca-Cola, no any Pepsi, Cola, or any of that. So basically, we used to consume all what was produced in the country. Like if you see there, you will see that in the 70s, the consumption here was 90 liters per person. That today is nearly 25. And in the 70s, if you compare to the US, the consumption in the US was 3 liters per person. I think nowadays it's around 8 to 9 liters per person, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's right around that.
Per week, you mean? Per week?
A week?
For me.
That is Lauren's face.
Right, yeah, I'm responsible for more of that average figure that we're talking here. Anyway, in the 70s, there was an invasion of beer, sodas, and other drinks. So there was a big removal of vineyards, and it was a big crisis in the industry. And this paved the way for some kind of resurgence in the beginning of the new age at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s here in Argentina in the last century. So that happens in the 90s, let's say. So the big, the European immigrants, winemakers with the big wineries focused on quantity rather than quality, were replaced by businessmen, locals, and from other countries. and they directed the industry, small productions, focus on quality rather than quantity, and focus on also on exporting. So from the 90s to these days, in the last 25, 35 years, we have, and thanks to the vine selection and improvement of the irrigation systems, the production technology, in the 70s, in the 60s, there were open tanks. No one would care about contamination and anything. The more quantity you will get, the better. Now we use closed tanks, we use oak, we use technology to measure, to see when the grape is ready, to measure the tanks, what's happening in fermentations and so on. The vineyard management also helped a lot to the quality of our wines, and also the anti-hail nets that maybe you want, maybe you don't see that nets, anti-hail nets. Hail is a big problem here in Mendoza. Actually, the day before yesterday, it was a huge hailstorm. Thank Lord, we have finished our harvest, but many people lost everything because it was huge. The storm was big, was long. It happened 2 days in a row, so it's like a big crisis. We are living like a big crisis here in Mendoza nowadays. That makes the price of the wine going up because there was expectations that we will have this many liters of 2023 harvest, and that was reduced probably 40% less. So it is a big issue here in Mendoza, hailstorms. And weather change and all this global heating is actually not helping. Another very important thing that happened in the 90s is the bottling source. That means that every bottle has a responsible, has a number of the winery. You can trace it back to how it was produced, when, and who's responsible for what is inside the bottle. And of course, the new global system of marketing networks, including what we're doing now, Zoom, that didn't happen 30, 40 years ago. And now we can be talking from anywhere in the world. So as a result, we are fifth wine producer in the world. Still 70% is sold on the domestic market and 30% exported, more or less. We are the 9th exporter country in the world, the 8th consumer, which is good. And well, you have some figures there. We are huge. Besides wine, we export a lot of must for doing, for making Coca-Cola. The sweetener of the Coca-Cola is made of Argentinian must, that is grapes crushed and not fermented. So all the sugar is there. And we are a big producer of table grapes to exporter to the world. And now you meet Famiglia Mosso. Are you bored?
Nope.
No. Are you still there?
Yeah, this is great. What a great picture. I love that picture, Paula. I haven't seen that one
Any
before.
questions so far?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
I have one.
Yeah,
Hi, Paula.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you still using the railway to get wine to Buenos Aires, or is that just obsolete
No.
now?
No, absolutely no. No. The railways were too expensive. The system was too expensive, so there is no more railways from Mendoza to Buenos Aires anymore. This project is supposed to, in 2-3 years, be on again, but for passengers. We transport everything mainly on trucks, lorries.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Okay, so that is Pablo Mosso and Eugenio Mosso. That's my son and Pablo, his father, and how the Famiglia Mosso went into wine growing. And we have over 100 years producing wines here in Mendoza. So, obviously, it's an Italian background here. Francesco Mosso, who is Pablo's great-great-grandfather, arrived in the 1860s here in Mendoza from the north of Italy. And they settled north of Buenos Aires, and they moved to Mendoza in 1906, and they devoted to viticulture. In the next slide, you can see Pablo's grandfather, Eugenio's great-grandfather, already in Chacras de Coria, very close to where is located our estate. And in this slide, you see Mosso Winery, which was started in 1909. That's why you see on our label since 1909. That's the year they started the winery. They were in business for 82 years, and different ups and downs that I described for viticulture before. In the history of viticulture, it was affected. I mean, every winery was affected by this downs and rises of the economy and, well, in general, the world situation. So they had great days in the 40s and 90s. They, other than producing wine, they also produced vermouth, because they came from the north of Italy, where vermouth was very traditional. So they have a couple of brands there. And in the 80s, they suffered like the same fate of the industry. So in 1992, they closed doors. Mosso Hermanos, or Mosso Brothers, the winery, the big winery, basically closed doors, and Pablo's father stayed with the estate that we own now. You can see here in this picture a harvest from 1975. So in 2003, Pablo, because his father has bought estate from the winery, Pablo replanted all the estate with Malbec, with the clone selection and so on, and he focused on making wines, quality wines, boutique wines, and his first vintage was 2003. And it was, focused in quality rather than quantity. They started to sell it domestically, but also export it to Switzerland, United States, and Chile over the years. So we are now focused on boutique wines rather than quality. There's a description there similar to a map that you saw before, and that describes Lulunta, is where our estate is located, and describes the altitude, the soil, the type of soil, and the thermal amplitude. And this slide that comes here is it will be very important for you to sell the wines, not only Mosso wines, but Argentinian wines, and what makes us unique for Mendoza in general. I mentioned that we have a desert climate. So we have to wait in the winter, the snow, then in spring and summer, the snow melts, and we get to manage the water. So this means that we get to irrigate the plants when we think the plants need irrigation. So this way we can say we have a quasi organic viticulture here, because we don't have unwanted or unnecessary moist. Like, for example, we spread chemicals, natural chemicals, actually, in our plants 3 times of the year, in 3 different times. And for example, in France, or where you have a maritime climate, you have to spread it like 4 or 5 times in a month. So that's what makes Mendoza unique or quasi-organic in terms of how many pesticides or fungicides we pour into our plants. Let me just drink a bit of water, because it's dry. It's a desert climate here.
Yeah, so...
And the other very important thing is the purity of our water. Actually, Lauren, do you remember last time you were here, you got surprised of the quality of the water, because it wasn't made drinkable by any plant. It just came like that from the mountains, and it was crystal clear.
Yeah,
and that's
it tastes so good.
With that water. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're right. It just tasted so pure. You know, you go to different parts of the world and the water all tastes different, and it was delicious there. I loved it.
Yeah, and it was crystal clear, just coming like that from the mountains, with no purification or settlement or anything of any source. It was just for the plants. We don't consider that drinkable water because it's not treated, but we actually drink it because it's pure. And the other very important thing is the thermal amplitude and the high altitude viticulture. I'll explain to you this thermal amplitude, what that means, and what that adds to the quality of wines. We have had here, heat waves this summer. But usually here, the difference between the temperature between day and night is 10-15 degrees. So what happens when you have, for example, 16-17 degrees in the night, and then you raise to 34-35 during the day? Like every species in the world, in the living world, the species tends to preserve their continuity, their survivance. So how grapes do this? They protect the seed that is in every berry. And how they protect the seed? By growing the pulp and the skin. And in the skin, we have the colors and the flavors. And in the pulp, we have the sugar and the water. So the higher the difference between temperature, between day and night, thicker you will have the skin and the pulp, especially the skin. This is the way of the vines to protect the seed. And so we have there a concentration of flavors, polyphenols, anti-aging agents that will make for the quality of our wine. And higher you go in viticulture, in the altitude, is more exposure to the sun rays. That would add also for for this anti-aging agents of the grapes. So this slide is very important for you to present points or arguments in favor of the Argentinian wines, especially the wines in Mendoza.
Paula, is that why everyone in Mendoza is so beautiful?
Pardon? Can you repeat again?
Is that why everyone in Mendoza is so beautiful?
Could be. Could be. And especially, and here we go to Lulunta. Lulunta is a unique terroir and actually is an appellation. And Pablo has done a lot to make it an appellation. It's because we are like in the middle. We are not very high, not very low. So, and we are next by the river. So we are, our soil gives wines with good structure. The good structure, it makes you feel, a good body in the mouth. Yet you have all this freshness of the wine that comes mainly from red fruit rather than dark fruit, black fruit, that makes those syrupy, heavy wines that you have to have with food. Lulunta, actually, and if you Google it or if you search it, you're going to see big names like Catena Zapata, Vigil, Norton, and so on, around Lulunta. And it's because we have in there this unique microclimate. There is a row of hills right in front of our estate. The soil has clay, so that makes for the structure of our wine. And this row of hills makes our different temperature between day and night wider. So we are still able to capture red fruit aromas and flavors while our structure is good for a good-bodied wine. I'm not saying the wines from lower areas are bad or higher areas are bad. They're just different. If you want a fresh, easy-to-drink wine, maybe you could have a lot of red fruit in the east areas, in the lower areas, but the structure will be a little bit weaker or lighter, let's say. And if you go to the Uco Valley, you will find these very robust wines with a lot of body, many points from Robert Parker and Tim Atkin and whoever, but wines that you will need food to enjoy it. Great wines, great points, but it's not a wine that you would drink, you get home and say, okay, I'm gonna have a glass of this, and that's it. You will need food. Nothing is good or bad. It's just the occasion where you will have it. And this is again a slide of our state. We have the same clones, the same soil, the same climate, but with two different management systems there. One is the trellis system, which is a French system, is the one that you see in the up left side of the slide. And then you have a Paral system or Italian system that you will see in the right down. And the same clones, the same soil would do two different expressions. So we have a single vineyard and we blend within the same variety, conducting the plants in two different ways. Did you get that?
Yes.
Yes. Right. So this is Pablo and his man. They've been working side by side for a long time. I'm saying 35 years. And they suffer and they fight and they laugh and they everything. He lives in the state and he is the one who works in the vineyard, and he's like a kind of partner. It's called contratista, and it's a figure, it's an employment figure that you still survives here in Mendoza. He's a kind of partner, I'm saying, because Pablo owns a estate. He has to provide for house and for housing and for a salary. And this gentleman, who's called Luis Mendez, he takes care of the vineyard and he gets a percentage of the grapes once it's harvested. So Pablo has to, he is a kind of partner, but he's also responsible because he gets that percentage. So he's more involved in he's not just an employee that leaves at 6. He's involved in a whole process, 24 hours a day. So they've been working for many years together, and his father used to work with Pablo's father. He was born at the state, so it is a very important person in our wine quality at the end of the day. So this is what we do. We're focused on Malbec because this is what is best in our state. So this is what we do. Our flagship or signature wine is Famiglia Mosso, is the one that you have over there in the US. We released an entry level, but with the pandemic and all that, we are rethinking the entry level side of the business. And there at the bottom, you kind of have more or less what you will be asked about. The wine is aged in oak, but we don't try to do very much, overdo it with the oak, because we want to still have the freshness of the flavors in our wine to reflect our terroir. Well, and that picture was taken last year. That's my son. It was 2022, 4th and 5th generation. Those are our bullet points. And this is a thank you not for coming, but for listening.
Thank you, Paula.
My pleasure. Where are you?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for you, if you have a minute.
Yeah.
You were talking about looking to the future, maybe developing another type of wine, or you mentioned it briefly. Are you guys working on new projects?
No, we did entry level some years ago with Screw Cap, but